Okay, so let me catch you guys up to what I just did. I went in there and I rigged the eyes basically the same way I did in the eyeball tutorial that I did, almost at the beginning of the Tip of the Week series, so a few months ago. So I've got my different layers in there for the highlight, the pupil, the iris, the eyelid, and the iris and the eyeball both have their own peg layers. I went into the different drawings here and I added pegs for each one of the drawings that I want to animate because I wanted to make sure that I have pegs that I can use to animate those on instead of animating on the drawing. And then what I did was I created a facial features composite here that I can use to gather together all of the facial features. And a couple of things that are important to know about this composite is I go ahead and I set this to be pass-through. The difference between as bitmap and pass-through is that what pass-through does is pass-through just gathers together all those elements without doing anything to them. When you do the as bitmap option there, which is the one that it is by default, and it makes, you can tell because it's a square composite and the pass-through has this kind of, curved edge parallelogram thing going on. When you set it to as bitmap, what it does is it actually flattens all of those layers down to one layer at that point. And it's a bitmap layer. So I really don't want to do that because I want to still have access to these elements as vector elements in case I want to do any kind of effects on them later on. So I'm just gathering them together as a pass-through. And now that I've gathered them together, because this facial features composite is not attached to the rest of the main composite yet, my scene composite down here, those facial features disappear. And in a way, I think this is very handy to make sure that it isn't connected right away because as you're connecting these things in here, they'll start disappearing and you'll be able to check, okay, I've got everything. Now I've got all the elements that I want to cut off with the face. I'm good to go. Now I can connect this down to my main composite there. Another good way of checking is actually just clicking on the composite and it's going to highlight all of those elements in blue that you do have selected there so you know that you've got them all. So once you have gathered together all of those elements, then you're ready now to cut them off with the edge of the face or with the head layer. So I want to take my head layer and just like we did with the other ones, I'm going to add my color override that I can use to filter out just the skin color. And so I go inside my color override. I'll grab the skin color one there. And if I'm doing a good job here, then I'm going to actually label these. So let's go back in there. I'll take my eyedropper and select the skin color and verify which one it's selected here. So now I can label this one as skin. And let's go ahead and label some of these other ones that weren't done. Most of them were done properly, so I do have labels on them. So I've got hair 1, hair 2. This is hair 3. And then I've got, this is shirt 1, shirt 2, shirt 3. Okay, so it looks like I've got everything labeled properly now. It means that I can go back into my network view, open that color override, and I can very easily find the color that I'm looking for because the one I'm looking for is skin. Now, in the case where you are going to have shadows on the face directly, now in this case I haven't drawn any shadows on this face, but you see that I have drawn shadows on the neck there. If I want the drawings to cut off with both the shadow color and the skin color, then I'll drag both of those in. So just to be safe, just in case, I'll drag both the shadow colors and the regular ones in there. So I've got a couple because I've got the skin shading on the nose, which is slightly lighter, and I've got the neck shadow that's slightly darker. So just to be safe, I'm going to render all of those colors, even though for the moment the only one that I have in there is that regular skin color. And now what I want to do is I want to add the cutter that I can use to cut those facial features off. So I'll drag the cutter in there and I'll put that color override head into the left hand side, and remember we need to invert that cutter for that to work. Now just like last week, when I want to actually animate all these facial features together now, I do want to have one sort of master peg that's going to be your facial features peg. So I'll just go ahead and label this so that I know what I'm touching. Let's call this facial features. And I want this facial features peg to be connected to all of the elements that I want to animate there. I don't usually connect my ears in there. I like to animate my ears separately because they usually change with respect to the perspective. So I really just want my my eyes, my eyebrows, my nose, and the mouth to go in there. And then once I click on that peg with my transform tool active, I can verify that I've got all of those elements in there and that they're cutting off properly. Now, as you're animating something like this, you might use your facial features peg to move things over slightly. And you know, I might want to make sure that the ear that's in the back here, and you should make sure you do label these correctly with front and back. So it looks like I've selected the back ear, but I've labeled it ear front. So let's just make this a little bit easier for myself by actually labeling it the correct thing. And I had to label it all the way to ear back for a moment because I can tell that I've got an ear in the back already, or one that I've labeled ear back already. So if I try to label them both the same thing at the same time, it's going to give me an error saying, oops, you've already got something that's got that name. Now you'll notice that I'm often opening up the layer properties window, so if you're doing that a lot, then you can just go ahead and add it in as a new window, and you can even stick it in between the other two. This is a really handy thing to do while you're rigging, because then if you have your layer properties tab open there as a window, then what happens is when you click on an element, it's going to update the layer properties automatically there for you, so it's going to be a lot faster to work with. So I'll just go back now and I will relabel these other ones so that they match. So this is the ear front peg, and then this one is the ear back peg. So now that makes a lot more sense. So if I want to animate the ear in the back, I probably also want the ear in the back to be physically behind the head. So let's just plop that one back behind the head layer. And I might need to make adjustments on the artwork, but that way when I'm animating this character I can move the ears around, and you know, I could move this ear inwards and scale it up and so on and so forth. Now when you are working with different drawing layers, you do still want to make sure that you do have a peg connected there and that you're animating from the peg. So if I want to animate that ear, I want to animate it from the peg, and I also want to make sure that I have that pivot point in the right spot there to animate this guy so that I can easily scale up and scale down that ear. So to go back to the pivot points, there was a pivot point video that you can review to talk about or to go over how the pivot points work. So for now, having rigged my face pretty much the way I did last week, what I've got is I've got all these elements as separate elements, and I can go up the chain to animate all the facial features together, and they will cut off automatically with the side of the face there. As I animate though, I'm probably going to want to animate these guys independently of each other depending on how this works. So you know, I might want to adjust the positioning, the relative positioning of these elements. And you might also want to have a version of the nose that you can morph to that's not the straight-on nose, so that this looks a little bit better from that perspective. And as you're animating elements that are sliding off the edge of the face, I just want to make sure I have my pivot point of my peg in a spot that's going to be useful for me here. So as I'm animating this off the edge of the face, you will want to scale those elements to give you that sense of perspective, which is really going to help with that. Now, when I was mentioning earlier about the nose and how you can take that nose and you can animate it really off the edge of the face, let's just try to simulate that here. I'll just move my hair out of the way to pretend that I've now animated to the profile view of this face. So I'm moving my ear out of the way as well. Oops, let me move that hair. I don't think I have a peg yet on that hair layer, so I'll nip up to the peg on the ear, make sure the peg on the ear is in the right spot, and then I can animate the ear out of the way there. And now what I'm doing is I'm going to basically animate these facial features until they cut off. And another good idea might be to have another peg that's a group of the eye and the eyebrow. So if I look over here, I've got my eyebrow totally separate from my eye. But if I can group those elements together, and I might want to just reorder these a little bit in my network so to make that easier. So I've got the front as one group there, and then I'll take the back as another group here. So then if I reorder these guys, I can take these back ones and then move them next to the eye so that I can adjust these things at the same time. And same thing with these eyebrows. I'll move them over next to this eye over here. So if I want to animate these together, then all I need to do is add another peg for that. So I'll add another peg that's going to be a parent of that first eyebrow, and I can use my Alt shortcut to snip it in there, and then I'll just add that in. So you see now I'm able to grab the eye and the eyebrow together and animate those, which is really helpful when you're doing things like animating, off the edge of the face. So then I can do the same thing on this eyebrow. Control P or Command P to add a peg there in your network, Alt to slide it in, and then you can nip that in there. So now I have this extra level of control that I can use to animate these guys. And so now as I animate this off the edge of the face, of course that one's going to get smaller. And then as I animate the nose off the edge of the face, you see that I now have the ability to have that nose there. And what you want to do actually in the case of the nose is you want to have the skin color of the nose going in front of the line on the face. So let me just pause for a second here, and then I will tell you how to do that.